The wind screamed like something alive. It tore at Clara Whitmore's coat, clawed its way down her collar, and burned her lungs with every breath she dragged from the air. Snow struck her face sideways, sharp as ground glass, stealing her vision in white bursts that came and went without warning. Somewhere behind her, far behind now, the overturned stagecoach creaked and groaned under the weight of the storm. A broken thing surrendering to the mountain. Clara staggered forward anyway. Her boots were already soaked through. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the snow were trying to claim her by inches. The world had narrowed to what lay directly in front of her. A shifting wall of white, the dim suggestion of pine trees, and the pounding question in her skull. Was this a terrible mistake? She pressed her gloved hand to her chest, feeling the thin packet hidden beneath her coat. Letters creased, softened by time and touch. The ink had bled slightly from months of rereading, the paper worn it, the folds where she had opened them again and again, late at night by lamplight. Dear Miss Whitmore, I imagine the winters in Boston are kinder than the ones out here. The words came back to her now unbidden, as if the storm itself were mocking her faith. It was December of 1875, and Clara Whitmore, daughter of a respectable shipping clerk, educated, mannered, and raised to believe safety was a virtue, was walking alone through a Montana blizzard because she had chosen hope over certainty. The stagecoach had left her behind, not intentionally, not cruelly. It had overturned on a narrow mountain pass hours earlier, one wheel shattered against rock. The driver had sworn the storm would pass. An elderly couple traveling with them had pleaded to stay together, to wait it out, to trust the mountains. Clara had watched the sky darken. She had felt the temperature drop so sharply it seemed to crack the air itself, and something deep inside her, something that had been stirring since the first letter arrived from Willow Creek, had whispered that waiting was how people disappeared. It's good. So she had taken her bag, her letters, and her future, and stepped into the snow. Now, as daylight bled away behind the clouds, doubt crept in with the cold. Her coat, fashionable in Boston, was no match for this place. The wool had absorbed moisture hours ago. It clung to her like a second skin, heavy and merciless. Her fingers burned and then disturbingly began to ache less. She knew enough to recognize the danger in that. Keep moving, she told herself. Do not sit, do not rest. She lifted her head, searching for anything, any sign of town, of road, of shelter. All she saw were pines bent under snow and the suggestion of a trail long since erased. The wind shifted. For a moment she thought she heard something beneath it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. Her heart leaped. "Hello?" she called, her voice thin and instantly swallowed. No answer came. Her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, and she went down hard. The breath knocked clean out of her. Cold surged through her palms as she tried to push herself up. Her arms trembled violently, refusing her command. She stayed on her knees longer than she meant to. The world tilted strangely, the edges softening. A warm throng and seductive began to bloom in her limbs. Clara pressed her forehead to the snow, fighting the urge to close her eyes. This is how it ends, a calm, distant part of her observed, alone, between one life and another. And then, as if summoned by the thought, a memory rose sharp and bright. A letter, the first one. She had nearly thrown it away. It had arrived on a gray Boston morning, the envelope plain, the handwriting careful but unfamiliar. Mail order inquiries, her aunt had sniffed when Clara mentioned it, her mouth tightening with disapproval. Respectable women do not answer such things. But Clara had opened it anyway. She remembered the way the words felt unpolished, honest. How he wrote of land and weather, of long silences broken only by wind and hoofbeats. It's how. He did not promise riches or romance, only partnership, work, a life that mattered. I am not looking for someone to complete me, he had written, only someone willing to stand beside me. She had read that line until it lived in her bones. Clara pushed herself upright with a cry, fury lending strength to limbs that wanted to fail. Not yet, she whispered into the storm. You do not get to take me yet. She took another step, another time-lost meaning. The sky darkened fully, day giving way to a twilight that felt permanent. Her thoughts began to drift, slipping between memory and sensation. Boston streets after snowfall. Gas lamps, glowing soft and golden. Her mother's voice, gone these 5 years now. The weight of expectation marriage chosen by convenience, not connection. The quiet dread of a life already written. Then, another memory intruded, sharper than the rest. The last letter, if you choose to come, he had written, I will be waiting. Clara stumbled again. This time she did not catch herself. She went down in the snow, her body folding as if, in relief, the cold no longer hurt. It simply was. Her fingers brushed the letters one last time, as if to reassure herself they were real. I tried, she murmured. Somewhere far away so far, it might have been imagined. Something moved against the wind. Shape, a sound. Hooves, perhaps. Or hope. Clara's eyes fluttered closed. Miles from Willow Creek, Matthew, she corrected weakly in her drifting mind. The name from the letters would never know how close she had come to vanishing between the lines of his careful words. Unless he was real. Unless this place was real. Unless someone out there was riding into the storm for reasons he could not explain. Her last conscious thought clung stubbornly to the idea that had carried her this far. If I stop now, I'd die here. The wind hadn't let up, not even for a minute. Bo Callahan stood on the edge of the porch, gloved hands clenched into fists, snow coating the brim of his hat.
Ow.
The mountains beyond his property were swallowed in white, the sky as unforgiving as a clenched jaw, no horizon, no breaks in the storm. Just the low moan of the wind pressing against the pines and a gnawing in his gut he couldn't shake. The stagecoach should have arrived by now, turned to the door where Tommy Boone leaned, arms crossed, chewing at the inside of his cheek, the way he always did when he was worried but didn't want to say it. That coach ain't coming tonight, Tommy said quietly. Bo didn't answer. Instead, he looked past the barn, squinting hard enough to pretend he might see the road that twisted down from Elk Pacific. The snow wasn't so thick it may as well have been midnight. He hadn't wanted to feel hope about Clara Whitmore. Hope was dangerous, unpredictable. It made a man soft, when softness could get him killed. But her letters had taken up space in his cabin long before she ever set foot in Montana. They were tucked into drawers, under coffee mugs. Even one slid between the pages of his Bible where he hadn't touched scripture in years. And now she might be out there in that. I'm going, he said, turning for the barn. Tommy didn't move. You go out in that, boss? You might not come back. She might already be gone if I don't. He didn't wait for a response, just moved fast, purposeful. Within minutes, Ranger his stallion was saddled and stomping. Nervously against the wind, nostrils flaring, Bo threw on an oilskin overcoat, tucked a flask into his saddlebag, and grabbed 2 extra blankets. The kind of provisions you packed when you might be carrying someone home. Or not coming home at all. Tommy watched him from under the barn awning. West side of the ridge is shallower, he called. Follow the old timber lineless. Chance of ice. And if you fall off your damn horse, yell loud so I can come fetch your stubborn ass. Bo gave a tight nod, mounted up, and nudged Ranger forward into the white. He didn't know if she was on that coach. There'd been no guarantees, no telegram, just her last letter saying, I'm coming soon. I've bought the ticket. Pray for light snow, he didn't pray. But he'd lit a lantern that morning and kept it burning ever since. The snow deepened quickly once he left the road. Willow Creek fell behind him, just a memory of warm stables and waiting fires. The forest closed in, trees sagging with the weight of snow, branches creaking like they might snap under the wrong breath. Ranger's hooves crunched with each step,
Ow.
Leaned low into the wind. Time warped in the storm. Minutes, hours, he couldn't tell the difference. He passed the old iron mile marker at the quarter bend. Pass. His gut twisted tighter. Then he saw it. A jagged wheel, a piece of harness. The faint imprint of a toppled coach. He dismounted fast, running a hand along Ranger's neck to calm him, then stalked toward the wreck. The coach lay half on its side, the back door blown open, canvas roof torn. Inside were no voices, no shouts, no movement. Climbed in, his boot thudded against something luggage, cold to the touch. He swept snow aside, searching faces. Bodies, nothing. Just an old couple huddled under a wool blanket alive, barely. The woman blinked, muttered something about a girl walking. He froze. Which way? He asked. Already? Pulling the blanket tighter over their shoulders. The man pointed with a shaking hand. Said she'd go. Straight east. Looking for the ridge road. Bo didn't wait. He mounted again, spurred Ranger hard, and aimed east. The trail was nearly invisible. The light was dying fast. Then movement. A flicker at the base of a tree, a dark shape. Slumped forward in the snow. He pulled Ranger to a skidding halt, dropped to the ground, and ran. She was curled in on herself, arms tucked under her body like she'd tried to preserve the last scraps of warmth. Her hair was frozen to her cheeks, snow crystallized on her lashes. One glove missing, the skin of her fingers so pale it scared him. Bo dropped to his knees, Clara. No answer. He yanked a blanket from his saddle and wrapped her fast, pulling her into his chest. Her body was stiff, but not gone. Not yet. He fumbled with the flask, uncorked it with his teeth, and poured a few drops of whiskey between her lips. Come. On, Clara. Don't you damn quit on me. Her eyes fluttered. A flicker of breath ghosted against his wrist. He exhaled roughly, scooped her up, and got her on Ranger before mounting behind her. Held her close, shielded her with his body as best he could. They rode back through wind that felt even meaner than before. Every gust clawed at him like it wanted her back. But he didn't let go, not once, by the time they reached the cabin. His legs were numb, his chest aching with cold. Tommy threw the door wide the moment he saw them. Holy hell. Hot water Bo barked, already carrying Clara inside. Blanket! Fire up! He laid her on the bearskin in front of the hearth, stripped the wet coat from her shoulders, peeled off her soaked stockings, boots. Tommy brought towels, a steaming basin. Bo worked fast, but gentle, drying her hair, pressing her palms between his. Her lips were turning pink again. Her skin wasn't so waxy. She's gonna live, Tommy said, half in disbelief. Bo didn't look up. Just sat there, running a thumb over the fragile edge of her jaw. Then her eyelids twitched. Opened, she blinked up at him, confused, voice ragged. Matthew? He closed his eyes. No, he said softly. My name, Bo Callahan. Her brow furrowed. Shh. You signed the letters. Matthew, I did. That's my middle name. He hesitated. Didn't want you finding out who I was just 'cause of the ranch. Wanted you to know the man, not the land. She stared at him, long unreadable. Then, her eyes slid closed again, but her lips moved, a whisper he barely caught. You came. His heart thudded once, heavy and deep. Yeah, he said, I did. He stayed beside her as she slept. The wind outside howled, the fire popped, and for the first time in months, something settled inside him. But that peace was short-lived, because when Clara woke again, she wasn't just grateful, she was furious. May God, don't. Take her. Not now. Not when I just found her. Clara woke to the sharp scent of cedar smoke and the distant crackle of a fire. The world came back in fragments stinging cold, a horse's muscles shifting beneath her, arms like iron around her body, and a voice low, rough, full of urgency. Now she was warm, too warm. Heat pulsed from somewhere near her, but her body still trembled like it couldn't decide whether to trust it. She blinked up at a ceiling made of thick timber beams, shadows from firelight dancing across the logs. Heavy wool blankets were pulled up to her chin. Something stirred beside her. You reawake? His voice came from a chair. At the foot of the bed, her vision swam for a second before settling on him. The man from the letters, or not? He was broader than she imagined. His dark hair curled slightly at the ends, damp with sweat or snowmelt. The fire carved hollows in his cheekbones, lit the green in his eyes like spring grass under storm clouds. But it wasn't the man she had built in her mind. "You lied to me before I even saw your face," she said, her voice hoarse. "Tea!" Didn't T flinch? He stood slowly, crossed to the hearth, poured water from a kettle into a tin cup, and brought it to her. "Here," he said, pressing it into her hands, small sips. She took it, if only because her throat burned, and her body still ached in ways that told her death had gotten uncomfortably close. The warmth of the water moved through her like a second fire. He crouched beside the bed, resting his arms on his knees. "I go by Bo Callahan. Matthew's my middle name." Her eyes narrowed. "Why write as Matthew?" He exhaled. Slow, not defensive, just tired. "You said in your first letter that you'd heard about Callahan Ranch through one of the listings, that some women were looking for a future." His mouth curled slightly bitter. "I'd had women write before, not about me, about what I owned. The acres, the horses, what I could give, and you thought I was the same." No, he looked at her straight. "But I had to be sure." Clara stared at him, her heart beating a little faster, not from cold. It's not from fear, but from the sudden pull of something she didn't expect to feel in that moment, understanding. He stood, grabbed a folded cloth from the table, and dipped it in a basin. "I shouldn't have lied," he said.
What?
"But everything in those letters, that was me. Not a word of it wasn't." Clara accepted the cloth when he handed it to her, pressed it to her temple where a dull ache throbbed. "I memorized some of them," she said quietly. "The words, yours." He looked surprised, then solemn. "I have yours. In a box. They made the winters easier." She gave a small nod. The silence between them softened. Outside, the wind had finally begun to die. The walls of the cabin creaked under its weight, but the storm had loosened its grip. Clara looked toward the frosted window. "I left people behind." Bo frowned. "The other passengers?" She nodded. "They wanted to wait." I didn't tea." "And you walked away from shelter to try to find help." His voice held a note of disbelief. "I walked because I couldn't wait for someone else to save me." The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Bo studied her, then turned back to the table and retrieved a small bundle fabric. He handed it to her carefully. Inside were her letters, her handwriting, worn at the creases, smudged in the corners. Clara stared at them, a lump rising in her throat. "You carried them with you?" she asked. "Always." His voice was quiet now, reminded me that something good was still out there. She held them for a moment longer, then set them on her lap. "You said your cabin was 4 miles from town, give or take." "Then we need to go back," she said, straightening with effort. "If there's any chance those people are still alive, you're in no shape to ride." "I wasn't in shape to walk through a snowstorm either, but I did." Bo hesitated, then he nodded. "We'll go at first light." She exhaled, relieved. A beat passed, then she looked around the cabin for the first time. It was small, but clean. The walls were lined with shelves of books, tools, preserved jars. A fiddle rested on a peg near the fireplace. Boots by the door neatly. Placed a rifle hung above the mantel. It looked like a place made for solitude. She looked back at Bo. "You live alone." He nodded. "And you wrote to a woman you'd never met, hoping she'd come change that." "Wasn't about changing it," he said. "It was about not letting it swallow me. That stopped her." She turned her face to the firelight, letting the heat soak into her bones. "I wasn't running away," she said after a long pause. "Not from my family, not from comfort. I came here because I was tired of living a life that didn't feel like mine." Bo didn't answer, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. "You should sleep," he said, reaching to dim the lantern. "Tomorrow we'll take what strength we've got left." Clara let herself lean back into the pillow. Fatigue she'd been holding at bay came rushing in. Bo turned away. She heard his boots scuff against the floor as he crossed to the other side of the room. Just before her eyes closed again, she whispered, "I came here for the man in those words. And he's standing right in front of me." Bo stopped. Didn't he say anything? But she swore just before the light slipped out completely. She heard his breath catch. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but softer now, like a benediction. Tomorrow, they'd ride back into what remained of the wreck, into a town she didn't know, toward a future neither of them had fully planned. But tonight, she slept, and Bo kept the fire burning, ready for whatever the morning would bring. The morning light hit the mountains like gold. Dust scattered across a canvas of snow. The storm had blown itself out sometime before dawn, leaving the world in a state of uneasy stillness like nature was holding its breath, waiting to see what survived the night. Bo saddled Ranger in silence, his movements methodical. Clara stood just inside the barn doorway, wrapped in a thick coat Tommy had lent her, boots still a size too big. Her cheeks were pale, lips chapped, but her spine was straight, and her eyes steady. "You sure?" Bo asked without looking at her. "I didn't come all this way to start leaving people behind." He nodded once, mounted up, reached down and pulled her up behind him with one firm motion. She didn't flinch this time. The cold bit sharper in the early light, but the wind had calmed, and the snow crunched under Ranger's hooves as they rode toward the pass. Clara leaned forward slightly, arms tucked close. She hadn't said much that morning, just got dressed, ate what she could, and told Bo she was ready. There were things still unsaid between them, but they'd both nearly died yesterday. Sort of thing earned some quiet. As the trail narrowed again, Clara shifted. "Should have told you," she said, voice muffled against his back. "I was engaged once." "In Boston." Bo didn't react. "Is it recent?" "Last spring, a banker. Well-connected, proper." She paused, but it was on love. It wasn't even truth. It was just what made sense to everyone except me. He let the silence stretch for a beat before asking, "Did you leave him for Montana?" "I left him for me." Bo's grip on the reins tightened slightly, but not with judgment, just understanding. Ahead, the trees began to thin, and the outline of the wreck came into view. The coach was still tilted at a sharp angle, now crusted in ice, the leather panels stiff with frost. Bo dismounted, helped Clara down, and approached slowly. "Hello," he called. "Anybody still here?" A muffled voice answered, from inside the overturned coach. Bo rushed forward and dropped to his knees, yanking open the shattered door. The older couple from before Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher were huddled under a layer of blankets. "And Hay? Alive, but barely. I told you she'd find help," Mrs. Gallagher murmured weakly as Clara dropped beside them, tears already in her eyes. "We need to get them warm," Clara said. Urgently, Bo nodded. "There's a warming shed down by Fletcher's milk closer than town." Clara blinked. "You mean the lumber yard?" "Has a bunkhouse with a stove. Tommy's brother used to keep it stocked for stranded travelers." Together, they helped the Gallaghers onto Ranger, wrapped them as tightly as they could, and began the slow walk toward the mill on foot. Bo led the horse. Clara walked beside him, half holding Mrs. Gallagher upright. By the time they reached the shed, Bo's hands were raw, and Clara's legs shook from the effort. But inside, the stove still stood, iron and black and solid. He found kindling in a dry box by the wall, sparked the fire, and warmth bloomed again. The Gallaghers huddled near the flames, whispering thanks between coughs. Clara crouched near the stove, rubbing life back into her hands, then looked at Bo. "We need to find the others." There were more passengers. He hesitated, the ridge trail's fork, after the coach rode. Some might have tried walking the wrong way. "You said you wanted someone to stand beside you," she said, rising to her full height. "I'm standing here. Let's finish this." They left the shed an hour later after making sure the Gallaghers could tend to themselves and had enough heat. Clara mounted Ranger again, riding alone, this time with Bo walking beside. As they moved deeper into the trees, Clara finally asked what had been sitting on her chest all morning. "Why do you live alone?" Bo didn't answer right away. He kicked snow from a buried stump and kept his eyes ahead. "My father built Callahan Ranch from nothing. Came west when he was 16 with one mule and no land. Married. Young, my mother died, birthing my little sister. He raised us both hard, taught us to work like men, feel like stone." Clara didn't interrupt. "He died to Winter's back. Hannah, that was my sister, she left after that." Got married to a storekeeper down in Utah. Said she couldn't stand the silence. Ashika. And you stayed, Clara said gently. I stayed because I couldn't bury two things in one winter. She closed her eyes briefly, Bo. I'm sorry.
Ow.
He shook his head. Not looking for pity, just wanted you to know the land didn't make me this way I did. You wrong, he turned. This land did shape you, but you chose what to do with it. That matters. Bo looked at her, like he wasn't used to being seen so clearly. Then movement, a figure stumbling through the trees. Clara gasped and called out. It was a young man, maybe 20, coat torn, hands blue. Help, he rasped before collapsing.
Ah!
Caught him just in time.
Hey!
They built another. Firebow stripped the boy's coat, wrapped him in spare furs, and rubbed warmth back into his limbs. Clara fed him bits of jerky softened in water. His name was Will. He'd been sitting near the driver when the coach flipped, got thrown clear, had been wandering in circles ever since. There was another girl, he whispered through cracked lips. Red hair schoolteacher from Ohio. Tried walking east. Clara's heart sank. That's the wrong direction. Bo stood slowly. Then that's where we ride next. They took turns riding and walking, eyes scanning every snowbank, every hollow. The sun was beginning to dip behind the pines again. Then they saw it, a flash of red, hair against white. Bo rushed forward. The schoolteacher was still breathing, barely. Her lips were cracked, her face sunburned from the wind. Clara pressed a hand to her wrist. She's alive. They built a third fire. Fed her what they could. Night began to fall. They would ride back to Willow Creek in the morning. But tonight, they sat under the stars, watching the flames, surrounded by the broken and the found. And for the first time since her boots hit Montana soil, Clara felt that this place wasn't just dangerous or wild, it was worth it. The broken parts. Especially those. You said you wanted someone who wouldn't walk away. I hope you meant it, because I don't plan to. The ride back into Willow Creek was silent but full. Not empty silence, the kind that comes from fear or grief, but a shared one, settled in the bones. Clara sat tall in the saddle. As Bo led the way, Ranger carrying them slowly through the last stretch of forest before town. Behind them, a wagon borrowed from the warming shed creaked under the weight of the rescued passenger's will. The red-haired schoolteacher, whose name was Mary Jo, and the Gallaghers, now swaddled in every blanket they could find. Tommy had ridden out ahead at sunrise to alert the local dock. They were expected. Clara watched the edge of the woods give way to snowy fields, then rooftops, chimneys, fences. Smoke curled from the chimneys like promises. The town looked unchanged, but nothing inside her was. She had come here expecting hardship. Yes. A man she didn't fully know. A place carved out of weather and grit. But she hadn't expected this to matter so quickly, to be needed to feel alive. The townsfolk waited outside the general store. Bo pulled Ranger to a stop and dismounted. Clara followed, her legs stiff but steady. Several townspeople rushed forward, helping carry the wounded into Doc Candler's clinic just down the lane. Mary Jo's mother was there too, tears streaking her face. She threw her arms around her daughter and sobbed against her hair. Clara turned away from the reunion to give them privacy and saw him, Sheriff Eldon Pike. Tall, broad face set like granite. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to silence a room. He stood with arms crossed beside the doctor's porch, eyeing Bo with something close to disapproval. Callahan, he said with a nod that held no warmth. Shh. Bo returned evenly. I heard what happened, Pike said, glancing toward the battered coach still lodged in a drift by the mill. Hell of a thing, and a hell of a choice, bringing strangers back to town. Bo's jaw tensed. Strangers? Clara asked, stepping forward before Bo could speak. Those strangers are alive because of this man. They would have died out there? Is that how Willow Creek treats its survivors? Pike's eyes slid to her, hard but assessing. We're the girl from the letters. I have a name, she replied sharply. It's Clara Whitmore. And Usai came here to marry Bo Callahan, what of it? He held her gaze, she didn't flinch. Finally, he looked away. There's a room open above the Hardware store? It'll do until the doctor clears 'em all. We'll make sure they have what they need. Bo gave a nod, clipped and cool. Appreciated. Pike turned without another word, disappearing into the crowd. Bo muttered under his breath, I forgot how much I missed his charm. Clara cracked a small smile, then let it fade. They helped move the others inside. Mary Jo was stable. Will had frostbite, but he'd keep all 10 fingers. Gallaghers were already sleeping. A miracle in itself. Clara helped Doc Candler clean tools, wash linens, sweep, melted snow from the floor. She didn't wait to be asked. Bo watched from the doorway. Later, when they stepped back outside and the sun was beginning to dip low again, Clara spoke. You didn't have to come back here. To town? Bo shrugged. Figured I should. Make sure they were all right, you two. They stood shoulder to shoulder on the porch as a light wind pushed snow across the street in drifting lines. You said once in your letters, Clara said slowly, that this town has a long memory. People remember what your father did, what your family name carries. I did, and you still brought me here. He glanced at her, brows furrowed. You brought yourself. She held his gaze. Maybe, but you didn't stop me, and you didn't let me walk away. Shifted. I ain't a hero, Clara. I didn't say you were. She took a step closer. But you're something better than that. You real. And you stayed. They stood there in the quiet for a moment longer before Clara added, I'd like to stay tonight. In town? Bo didn't move. You think I'll stop you? No, she said. But I want you to know I'm not running. I just need a night to breathe. To write down everything I saw before it slips away? Nodded once, solemnly. I'll be back in the morning, she said. I know, she hesitated. Then she stepped forward and kissed his cheek. Quick, firm. Not romantic, not yet, but something rooted in truth. Good night, Bo. He didn't answer until she was halfway up the steps to her rented room. Then he said, just loud enough for her to hear, You looked death in the eye, and still came back for more. That's the kind of woman I'd wait a lifetime for. Clara paused, hand on the doorknob. Then she went inside, and Bo stood there on that porch, the cold air biting at his collar, wondering for the first time in years if maybe, just maybe, this life could still surprise him. Clara sat by the window in her rented room above the hardware store, pen, scratching across paper in a rhythm only silence could hold. Her fingers were numb from the cold that crept in through the frame, but her mind burned too brightly to stop. She wrote about the snow, the coach wreck, the faces of the people she'd helped save. Ow! About Bo's arms lifting her from the ice. Ow! About Ranger's steady gait beneath her, when everything else in her life felt broken. Every detail mattered. Now she didn't want to forget the way survival looked up close. But between the lines, without saying it outright, she wrote about him. How the man in the letters had turned out to be more than she imagined, quieter, but truer than ink ever dared to be. A knock pulled her from the page, Clara. It was a woman's voice, soft but sure. She opened the door to find Mary Jo standing there, wrapped in a patched wool shawl, face still pale but recovering. I saw the light, Mary, Jo said, didn't mean to interrupt. Come in, Clara said, gesturing her inside. You shouldn't be walking around. You barely made it out of the forest. Mary Jo smiled thinly. After yesterday, the stairs don't scare me much. Clara poured her some tea from the kettle, warming on the small stove. They sat at the edge of the bed, shoulders brushing. I heard what you did, Mary Jo said, how you went after us. Left the coach, took that horse, and just walked. I didn't know what else to do. You did something. It's more than most. Clara looked away, embarrassed by the praise. Mary Jo took a sip of tea, then set the cup down. You're staying with him? But Rancher. Clara hesitated. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but you came for him. I came for a version of him. The man in the letters. And what did you find? Clara looked down at her hands. Someone who hides the best parts of himself. Under layers of silence, who doesn't ask for help but gives it anyway. Someone who feels like belonging even when he's not trying. Mary Jo nodded, thoughtful. I used to think love was something that hit you like a horse kick, she said, quick and hard. But now I think it's the quiet kind that saves you when nobody's looking. Clara didn't reply. She didn't have to. Outside the wind howled again, but this time it was only noise, not threat. Mary Jo stood to leave. You belong here more than you think? After she was gone, Clara didn't return to her writing. She lay awake long after the fire dimmed, Bow's words from the night before playing on loop. The kind of woman I'd wait a lifetime for. A morning came gray and brittle. Clara packed her things and walked to the clinic first. She checked on the Gallaghers, kissed Mrs. Essex Gallagher on the cheek. They left some coins for Doc. Candler efforts. Then she stepped into the street and saw Bo waiting with Ranger already saddled. He didn't speak, just nodded. She climbed up behind him again without hesitation. Yes. This time, she didn't ask where they were going. Of town, instead of toward the cabin, the road narrowed into scrubland, passing a few scattered farms, then turned into a trail lined with old pines. The land rose in shallow swells, and the air smelled of cedar and ash. Where are we? Clara asked after nearly an hour. Bo pulled Ranger to a stop at the edge of a ridgeline. Below them was a clearing, and in that clearing stood a ruined chapel. Only half the roof remained. The bell tower was collapsed, its stones scattered like forgotten prayers. The windows were long gone, leaving only open frames that stared into the forest beyond. This was where my mother was buried, Bo said, and my sister. Before she left, she'd come out here, said it made her feel close to something better. Clara dismounted. The snow crunched beneath her boots. Bo stood still, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the ruins like he was remembering a different lifetime. I don't bring people here. Why now? Because I wanted you to see where it started. All of it. The grief. The silence. The reason I don't smile unless it matters? Clara moved beside him. You don't owe me that, she said. I want to give you that, he replied. Because if you're going to decide to stay or go, you should know what you'd be living with. She looked at him, the wind catching her hair, the cold biting her cheeks. But it wasn't the cold she felt. It was heat coiled deep. In her chest, not romance, not yet, but trust. Hard won and unspoken. I'm not afraid of ghosts, she said. No, Bo agreed. You carry your own. He stepped forward and knelt near one of the broken stone markers, brushing away the snow. Then he added, There's something else I didn't tell you. Clara tensed. Bo looked up at her, eyes unreadable. I didn't just write those letters to pass time. I wrote them because I couldn't sleep unless I believed someone out there might still choose me. Not for the land. Not for the name, just me. Clara's throat tightened. Then I am glad I came. Bo stood slowly. You still can change your mind. She stepped closer, and so can you. He smiled just a little. I already did. They stood in silence a moment longer before the clouds shifted and sunlight broke through, spilling over the ruined chapel in soft beams. Clara reached for his hand. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He simply held it like he'd been waiting a long time for something that didn't need to be said out loud. They rode back to the cabin just before nightfall. Air was still, the hearth still warm. For the first time since they met, Bo didn't offer to sleep in the chair. He just said, Stay by the fire. I'll put the kettle on. And Clara whispered to herself, If this is the life we build from ruins, then I wouldn't trade it for anything whole. The thaw came slowly. Spring in Willow Creek didn't arrive with grand declarations. It whispered in the way. The snow melted in patches beneath the eaves, in the way the horses' coats began to shed, and how the wind lost its bite by noon. But it was coming, and with it, change. Clara stood on the porch of the Callahan cabin, morning light casting gold across the hills. She held a mug of coffee in her hands, not drinking, just feeling its warmth seep into her fingers. Inside, Bo was fixing the hinge on the kitchen door. The way he always did things, quiet, steady, necessary. They had settled into a rhythm. Neither had spoken aloud. She hadn't returned to her room above the hardware store. Her trunk still sat untouched in the corner of the cabin, as though neither of them wanted to ask what it meant to unpack. Every night she slept by the fire, and every morning she woke to the scent of wood smoke and silence in bow. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they said nothing, and it still felt full. But beneath it all, Clara sensed a pressure building, like wind behind a mountain ridge, ready to crest. It came to a head that afternoon. Sheriff Eldon Pike arrived on horseback, dismounting with the same stiff spine and cool glare he wore like a badge. Bo stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Clara watched from the porch, heart tight. "Sheriff," Bo said, "Callahan, you get lost, or is this an official visit?" Pike didn't rise to the bait. "Word is your girl's still here. She has a name," Bo said flatly. "I'm aware." Pike turned to Clara. "Miss Whitmore, I need to speak with you." "Go. Town business." Clara descended the steps slowly. "What sort of business?" "There has been a letter?" "From Boston." Her breath caught. "Boston?" Pike pulled an envelope from inside his coat and handed it over. Clara recognized the seal immediately. It was from her father. She tore it open with shaking fingers, eyes scanning the elegant script. Father's tone was as sharp as ever. He'd received word of her arrival in Montana, and he was traveled fast when money was involved. He was concerned for her well-being, demanded she return immediately, promised a suitable match. Still awaited her if she came to her senses. No questions, no warmth, only orders. Clara folded the letter neatly and slipped it into her pocket. Pike studied her. "Your people want you home." "I am home," she said. The sheriff gave Bo a long look. "You sure she's not just hiding here, running from something she doesn't understand?" Bo didn't answer. Jaw locked tight, but his eyes were on Clara, waiting for her answer. She turned to Pike. "If my father wanted to know what I understood, he could have asked. Instead, he sent a summons." Sue worried. "No, she," said he, embarrassed. The wind stirred. The only sound was the creak of the barn door. Clara stepped back toward Bo. Not touching, but close. "I came here to marry a man I barely knew," she said. "But I stayed because I found someone who doesn't treat me like a burden or a transaction. Someone who lets me be. You think I'm hiding? I've never stood more in the open." Pike stared at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I had to deliver it, that's all." He mounted up and rode off without another word. Bo watched until he disappeared down the trail, then turned to Clara. "You all right?" She nodded, but her shoulders were tight. "The letter was never going to change my mind," she said. "But it reminded me what I left, what I don't ever want to return to." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the fields, checking fence lines, repairing what the winter had torn. Clara worked beside Bo, her hands blistered, her cheeks red with cold and sun. She didn't complain. She never did. Later, after dinner, they sat by the fire. Bo finally broke the silence. "You don't have to stay." Clara blinked. "What? I mean it?" Kept his eyes on the flames. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me something. You came out here and it wasn't what you expected. Well, I'm not what you expected. If you want to go back to Boston or somewhere else, I won't stop you." She stared at him. "You think I stayed because I felt obligated?" He didn't respond. Clara stood slowly. "Do you know what Boston gave me? A future already decided? A dress picked before the man was. A life where silence was more valuable than honesty. I left because I couldn't breathe." Bo finally looked at her. She moved closer, voice soft, but sure. "You gave me more freedom in one snowstorm than I ever had in 25 years. He didn't know what to say. So she kept going. "I don't want perfect. I don't want polite. I want this. The quiet ones. The mess." She crouched in front of him, took his hands. "I want to build something that doesn't need permission to exist." Bo's throat worked. "I don't have much to offer. You have everything I need." Pulled her into his arms. Held her there like he'd never let go. And for a long time, neither of them spoke. When they finally parted, he stood and walked to a drawer. Pulled out a small velvet pouch, handed it to her. Inside was a silver ring. Simple, worn, but beautiful in its honesty. "It was my mother's," he said. "I Wasn't going to give it to someone just to say I did. But I'd like you to wear it if you're sure. She slipped it onto her finger without hesitation, then looked up at him and smiled. I've never been more sure of anything. Bo exhaled, the tension slipping from his frame like melting snow. That night they lay beside the fire, not out of necessity, but choice. And just before sleep took them, Clara whispered into the darkness, if love has to be earned out here, then I hope we never stop working for it. In the stillness, Bo smiled. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't bracing for loss. He was building towards something. And that made all the difference. The sun hung high over Willow Creek, casting long shadows from the budding cottonwoods and thawing streams that ribboned through the hills. Spring had finally stretched its legs. Calves kicked in the pastures, wood smoke no longer choked the skies, and Clara woke to birdsong instead of the wind's morning howl. She had never lived this kind of life before, waking before dawn. To feed chickens, hanging linens in the breeze, warming beans over an open stove, while Bo mended fence posts with his sleeves rolled to the elbow. It wasn't romantic, but it was real land that made it beautiful. Some days they rode into town together. Others, Bo gave her space, letting her wander the valley on her own with a notebook tucked beneath her coat. She wrote letters to no one, just thoughts, scattered like seeds, waiting for something to grow. But peace, she was learning, never came unchallenged. It started with the missing lambs. Bo came in late from the field one evening, dirt clinging to his boots, brow tight. Something spooked the herd. Clara set down her spoon wolves. But they don't usually drag off two in one night and not leave a mess. You think it's people? Could be something else. He didn't say what. The next morning, Tommy rode in from his father's land 2 miles east, face flushed, breath quick. 3 calves gone, fences torn, like someone cut M clean through. Bo listened, jaw clenched. Tell your PA to keep a rifle close. I'll ride the ridgeline tonight. I'll come with, Clara said immediately.
Ow.
Gave her a look, not cruel, just heavy. It ain't like chasing down a stagecoach in the snow. If someone's behind this, they're mean enough to do worse to folks than cattle. That's exactly why I'm coming. He hesitated, but in the end, he nodded. By sundown, they were saddled and moving west, where the ridge curved. Above the ranch land like a sleeping beast, the trail was narrow, lined with shale and brittle pine. They rode in silence, eyes scanning the tree line. Dusk painted the sky in gold and bruised purple, shadows thickening with every step. They found the tracks near an old trapper's hut, fresh. Boot prints, wide set, heavy. Not wolves. Clara crouched near the indentations in the mud, running her gloved fingers along the edge. Whoever it was, they were dragging. Something, look. A long groove trailed from the prints toward the trees. Bo followed it with his eyes. Back toward the old mine shaft. Clara remembered hearing about it, the shaft that collapsed 10 winters ago, killing 2 men, sealing off the tunnel for good. Folks said it was cursed, left alone. I'll go first, Bo said, rifle in hand. They moved slowly, Ranger's hooves careful on the loose rock. The trees thickened, then broke into a clearing. And there, just at the edge of the shaft's old entrance, was the carcass of a calf. Its throat slit, its blood pooled and frozen in jagged rivulets. On the rocks, painted in something dark and sticky, was a crude symbol. A circle with 3 claw marks slashed through the middle. Clara felt the chill ripple down her spine. What the hell is that? She whispered. Bo didn't answer. He stepped closer, inspecting the ground. No tracks leaving. Think they're hiding down there? Bo's grip on the rifle tightened. Or trying to scare us off? Suddenly, a twig snapped behind them. Clara spun. 2 men stepped out from the trees. One tall, lean, with a patchy beard, and eyes too pale for comfort. The other older, face scarred and nose crooked like it had been broken more than once. Neither smiled. Evening, the tall one said. Didn't he expect company?
Ow!
Stepped in front of Clara. This your handiwork? Duh. Scarred man grinned. Depends. You like it? Cut my fence, took my stock? Why? Land like this? The man gestured wide. It ought to belong to people who use it. We do use it, not like we do. Clara's voice cut through the tension. You think scaring ranchers off with blood and symbols makes you worthy of this? Landlady, the tall one sneered, ain't about worth. It's about taking. The standoff held. Bo lifted his rifle, slow and certain. You got 3 seconds to turn around and disappear. After that, this land's gonna take you. For a second, Clara thought they'd fight, but the men exchanged a glance, then backed away, fading into the woods without another word. Bo exhaled. They'll be back. They'll eat. Don T. Wait. Back at the ranch, Clara wrote to Sheriff Pike that same night. Bo rode into town the next morning, and by noon, 3 more men from the neighboring ranches had arrived with supplies, rifles, and hard eyes. They were tired of being pushed, of letting fear take root. Clara worked beside them, hammering boards, patching fences, boiling coffee by the pot. But beneath the grit and resolve, unease twisted in her chest. These men weren't just thieves. They were marking something, claiming it. And they didn't seem afraid to spill blood. That night, Bo sat by the hearth, sharpening his knife. The fire cast his face in shifting light. Clara watched him, heart full of pride and worry in equal measure. You're not just protecting land, she said softly. You're protecting us? Bo didn't look up. It's the same thing, out here. No, Clara replied. Land can be bought. This what we're building? It's earned. He finally looked at her. You're not afraid? I am, she admitted, but I'm not running. You told me once I could choose you. This time I'm choosing this, even if it's hard, especially if it is. He nodded, and in his eyes, she saw something shift. Not relief, respect. They sat in silence again, the fire crackling low. Then Clara whispered, not to break the quiet, but to seal it. If we bleed for something, let it be for a future we die to keep. Bo didn't reply. But he reached across the space between them and took her hand in his calloused. Steady, warm, and she knew the storm hadn't passed. It was only beginning. The air turned brittle as April deepened, colder than it should have been for spring. The days lengthened, but shadows seemed to grow longer, not shorter. The calm after the confrontation at the mine shaft didn't last long. It wasn't pest, it was pressure, gathering like storm clouds waiting to break. Clara noticed it first in the way Ranger paced restlessly at night, ears twitching toward the woods, and the way Bo kept checking the same latch on the barn door twice, 3 times. The men who had come to help Tommy, Mr. Rivera, old Hank Miller, began taking turns patrolling the property after dark, rifles resting easy on their hips. No one said it aloud, but the fear wasn't just about cattle anymore. It was about intent. Someone wanted to take the land, not out of desperation, but out of strategy. Marking with blood, hiding in the woods, watching, Clara began. Sleeping with a lantern near her cot and a knife under her pillow, not because Bo couldn't protect them, but because she wanted to be ready too. And still, the worst didn't come in the dark. It came in the morning. Bo found Ranger wounded by the creek, a deep cut across the flank, blood soaked into the snow-speckled grass. He staggered, eyes wild, breath sharp with panic. Clara ran to the barn when she heard the shout, heart leaping into her throat. Bo was already at work, hands pressed to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Rope. Now, he barked. She threw him the length of hemp from the saddle rack. His hands moved fast, steady, binding the wound tight, whispering to the animal as if it could understand. You stay with me, old boy. You don't. Quit on me now. Clara crouched beside him, one hand on Ranger's side, the other gripping Bow's shoulder. He's strong, she whispered. He'll pull through. But her voice trembled, because the cut wasn't random. It was deliberate. Clean, cruel. Bo stood after a long minute. They came onto the property. Clara stared at him. You were sure? They wanted to send a message. She already knew what that meant. It was time to send one back. That night, the men gathered in the barn, lanterns casting shadows on their grim faces. Bo stood at the center, arms crossed, voice calm. They think they can wear us down, scare us out, but we don't scare easy. There. Getting bolder, Tommy said. What if they come for you next? Then they better be ready for a fight, Bo said simply. We can't keep playing defense forever, Rivera added. They know these woods. They're picking us off like we're blind. Bo nodded, then we stopped reacting. Take the fight to them. A silence followed, until Clara stepped forward. Do we know where they're hiding? Eyes flicked to her, at mine shaft's part of it, but I'd bet they've got a main camp deeper in. Somewhere they don't think we'll look. I know where, she said. Heads turned. When I came west, she continued, I spent my first nights at the halfway house east of the ridge. There's a hollow behind it, hidden from the road. I remember hearing voices in the trees at night, boots on gravel. I thought I imagined it, but now. That'd give them access to both sides of the valley, Bo muttered. Close enough to the creek, and the cattle run. They're watching us from both angles, Clara said. If we wait, we'll lose more than stock. Bo didn't hesitate. We ride at dawn. The plan came together fast. Clara stayed up late boiling coffee, sharpening, blades, wrapping bandages, just in case. She and Bo didn't speak much, but every glance held a weight. Not fear, but knowing. This wasn't just about survival. It was about claiming something, not land, dignity. They rode out before the sun breached the ridge. For men total, Clara included. She wouldn't be talked down from. Not this time. The forest was quieter than it should have been. Even the birds held their breath. As they neared the hollow, Bao raised a hand. The group stopped. He pointed toward smoke, faint but rising, just past the tree. Line, they dismounted and moved on foot. What they found wasn't a crude hideout, was organized. A series of tents half buried into the hillside, pen for stolen livestock, crates marked with brands from neighboring ranches, and men, 6 of them armed, laughing over a fire like they didn't have a care in the world. Clara's stomach twisted. They weren't hiding. They were settling. Bo didn't wait. He stepped into the clearing, rifle raised. Hands where I can see 'em. The reaction was instant chaos, shouts, steel drawn. One man ran, but Tommy tackled him. Another reached for his pistol, but Rivera fired into the air. It was Clara who locked eyes with the tall one. The same hood marked the mine. Shaffy froze when he saw her. You, he spat, the preacher's girl. I'm not anyone's girl, she said coldly. But I'm the one who'll remember your face when the judge asks, who tried to burn this valley? Down, he lunged. Bo tackled him mid-charge. They crashed into the fire pit, ash flying. Fists flew, boots kicked. Clara ran to help, but Bo had him pinned, knuckles bloodied, eyes blazing. You think this land owes you? Bo snarled. It doesn't owe anyone. We fight for it. The man didn't respond. He was out cold. By sundown, the men were roped and tied to their own wagon, headed back to Willow Creek. Sheriff Pike met them at the edge of town, eyes wide when he saw the stolen goods. Guess you were right, he said. Justice still works out here. Bo didn't smile, just looked at Clara. That night they sat on the porch. Ranger resting in the paddock, healing slow. You did more than hold your own, Bo said quietly. I didn't come west to be protected, Clara replied. I came to live. And this is living, ain't? They fell into silence. Again, the stars bold in the Montana sky. Then Clara leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, Let them come with fire. We'll answer with roots. And Bo, for the first time in years, felt peace settle somewhere deeper than his bones. Somewhere permanent. The spring. Rains came late but hard. For 3 days straight, Willow Creek drowned under the weight of storm clouds. Soil turned to soup, creeks overflowed, and the hills wept with mud. The air smelled of moss, metal, and distant thunder. It wasn't the kind of weather to stir a fight, but it brought something just as dangerous: doubt. Bo stood on the back porch of the ranch house, hat dripping, watching as the wind tore loose a section of roof on the storage shed. Behind him, Clara was arguing with the window, trying to stuff a rolled towel under the sash to stop the draft. When it finally stuck, she turned toward him. We need to move the feed before it spoils. Bo didn't flinch. Can't do much about it until the rain lets up. Clara crossed her arms. So we wait? Watch everything rot? He met her eyes. Tired, guarded. Sometimes waiting is the fight. she exhaled, stepping beside him, both of them staring out at the sheets of gray falling from the heavens. "It's not the storm that bothers me," she said. "It's what it leaves behind." Bo didn't answer. He didn't have to. It died day 4. The roads into town were near impassable, but the news found its way through anyway. A letter, hand-delivered by a ranch hand from 2 ridges over. Clara read it aloud at the table, Sheriff Pike stepping down. Bo looked up from his coffee. "What? Effective immediately," she continued. "Says it's personal, says the town needs someone younger, someone who knows how to hold both a gun and a grudge." Bo's face didn't change, but his grip on the mug tightened. "What aren't they saying?" Clara asked. He shook his head. "Pike's no coward. If he's stepping down, someone's pushing. Those men we caught had allies," he said. "Maybe more than we thought." The next day, a new name was posted on the bulletin board at the general store. Marshall Clay Durow. Clara saw it when she rode in for flour, a name she hadn't heard before. But everyone else seemed to have. The storekeeper's hands trembled as he bagged her oats. A woman at the counter left without her change, too eager to get outside. And when Clara asked, "Who is he?" no one looked her in the eye. She got her answer the next morning. Bo came back from town with blood on his knuckles and a gash on his temple. Clara was in the barn mucking stalls when he staggered in. She ran to him. "What happened?" "Marshall Darrow," he said through gritted teeth. "Hired himself a crew. Paid men, not deputies. Muscle. They're shaking down businesses. It's asking who owns what, who supports who." Clara led him to the water pump, helped him wash the blood from his face. "Did he hit first?" "No." Bo said, "But he wanted me to, and I didn't make it easy." Clara smiled despite herself, then sobered. "What does he want?" "Control," Bo said. "And a piece of every fence post between here and the state line." That night, Tommy came riding in fast. "They raided the Gallagher's barn," he said, barely catching breath. "Said they were looking for contraband. Took the last of their seed grain and arrested their boy." "Arrested?" Clara said. "For what?" "Didn't he say?" Bo was already saddling his horse. "I'm going." "Not without me," Clara said. "No," Bo said sharply. "You're staying here." She froze. "This is bigger now," he continued. "I can't think straight if I'm worrying about you getting caught in the crossfire. I can help." "You can," he said, softer. "But if something goes wrong, I need to know you're safe, that this place still stands." The unspoken weight hung between them. This place wasn't just wood and nails. It was them, he wrote out. "Clara, didn't he sleep?" When he returned, hours later, mud-caked and soaked through, there was a fire in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Now got the Gallagher boy out. She ran to him. "Are you all right?" "But it's not." "Over." He handed her a folded paper. A land requisition order. With his name on it. Clara scanned it. "They're trying to take the ranch. Legally," Bo said. "On claims that the title was misfiled years ago. Darrow's using town influence, digging up old paperwork. If he gets the judge to sign, this land won't be ours anymore." He nodded. And then, for the first time since the snowstorm that brought them together, Clara saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes resolve. "I won't let them have it," he said. "I'd rather burn it to the ground." "No," she whispered. "That's what they want, for you to lose your head, your name, your grip." Bo looked at her like he hadn't breathed in hours. And finally, the wall cracked. "This place was my father's shame," he said. "His debts, his guilt. I've spent 10 years trying to turn it into something different. Honest, steady. But maybe they were right all along. Maybe the Callahan name doesn't belong here." She reached up, cupped his face. "Then we change what it means. How? We fight smart. We find the gaps in there. Papers. We find the people who still believe this valley is worth saving. We remind them he didn't speak. But he leaned into her touch like it was the only real thing left in the world. And for a long time, they stayed that way." Clara's voice finally broke the silence. "If they want war, then let them come, but we'll fight with roots, not rage." Bo pulled her into his arms, held her tight, not out of fear, but out of faith. Because something stronger than blood bound them now. was soil, it was sweat, it was home. The sun broke through on the 5th day after the storms, but no one in Willow Creek felt relief. The puddles had dried, the roads hardened, but in their place came whispers about papers, about threats, about who the land really belonged to. Inside the ranch house, Bo sat at the kitchen table, a pile of deeds and ledgers spread before him. His hair was still damp from the river. He'd gone to clear his head, returned looking like a man who'd seen ghosts. Clara poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one beside him. "You find anything?" He didn't look up bits. Enough to know someone's been tampering, not enough to prove it. She sat down, flipping through the tattered documents. Land grants, bank letters, notes in his father's hand, some in a shaky scrawl, some never signed. "This," she said, pointing to a folded page near the bottom. "This isn't from the same ink." Bo frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara held it to the light. "The seal's faded, the stamp's off-center, and this signature, it's too smooth. Your father didn't write like that." He leaned forward, studied it. His face hardened. "It's forged." They both stared at it. "Who would do that?" she whispered. Bo's voice was a low rasp. "Someone who knew this land would be worth something one day. Someone patient enough to wait." They both knew who. Marshal Darrow hadn't just come to enforce law, he'd come to own something. The town, divided, exhausted, scared, was too rattled to resist. Clara stood and paced. "So what's next? You take it to Pike?" "He's still got allies, he's gone," Bo said quietly. "Packed up and left last night, left a note with the doc. Said there's no place for old law in a town rewriting its own." Clara's chest tightened. "It's just us," he added. "No," she said, voice firm. "It's not." By noon, she'd gathered the Gallaghers, Rivera, Tommy, and 3 other ranchers. They met in the back of the feed store, shades drawn. Clara stood before them, not as a bride or housekeeper, but as a leader. "You all know what's happening," she said. "Darrow's trying to bleed us out, one signature at a time." "What can we do?" Mrs. Gallagher asked. "We don't have lawyers, judges. Hell, we barely have clean paper." "We have land," Clara replied, "and we have eyes. We've all seen the way his men operate, the raids, the threats. If we document it together, we build a case. We find the paper trail he doesn't want us to see."
Tommy
leaned forward. "You think someone in town's helping him?" "Bet my life on it," Bo said from the corner. Rivera slammed his fist on the table. "Then let's flush him out," No, Clara said sharply. "We Dante start a war. We start a ledger. Everything he touches, we record. Every lie, every deal, every time he steps outside the law." They all looked at her, not in doubt but with hope, like they'd been waiting for someone to say it aloud to give it shape. To fight with truth, not bullets. Bo watched her from across the room and saw her as she truly was. Not just his salvation, the Valley-S. The next few days passed in a flurry of action. Clara and Bo divided the valley into sectors, assigning routes for the ranchers to ride and gather reports. Who'd been visited? What had been said? What was taken? Tommy built a box beneath the general store, porch a drop for letters and logs. They used aliases, dates, cross-referenced supply chains. They became, in effect, detectives. And the valley began to remember what unity felt like. Old feuds were set aside. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years began sharing meals. Children ran errands with sealed notes, delivering messages between farms. It was rebellion disguised as cooperation, and in the center of it all stood Clara. In the morning, she worked beside Bo, fixing the south fence. In the evening, she gathered with the others, logging reports, connecting dots. And late at night, she wrote letters to judges, clerks, archivists, anyone who might still care about the law. She signed each one the same. Clara Whitmore, Callahan Stewart of Willow Creek Valley. Then came the turning point. A man named Jarvis rode in from Red Bluff with a parcel marked urgent. Bo took it inside, opened it by the firelight. Inside was a copy of the original land charter for the Callahan homestead marked. No corrections, no tampering. Sent by a retired clerk who remembered Clara's letter. Attached was a note. The record in Willow County's ledger is altered. I've enclosed the unaltered original for your defense. Stand tall, The law was made for good men, not just loud ones. Clara read the words aloud, tears pricking her eyes. Bo stood slowly, letter in hand. "If we get this in front of the right eyes," he said, "Darrow can't touch us." "He'll try," Clara said. "He'll try harder." Bo looked out the window. The moon cast a silver glow over the valley. "He already is." The next morning, they found the mailbox burned, the barn doors unlatched. Fence wire snipped along the north trail a warning. It didn't speak of it. It just reinforced. That night, Clara stood on the porch as thunder rumbled again in the hills. Bo joined her, shoulder brushing hers. "You scared?" "Yes," she said honestly, "but not of them." He raised a brow. "I'm scared of what this place becomes if we don't fight," he nodded slowly. They watched the lightning crawl along the horizon like a message waiting to be read. Then Clara whispered the words that would carry them both into the next chapter. "This valley's worth bleeding for because it gave us something to live for." And Bo, for the first time since he was a boy, understood the difference. Between land and legacy, one could be taken, the other had to be earned. The valley held its breath as April came. The snow had fully melted, the earth was greening, and the scent of wild sage carried through the air like a whispered promise. But beneath it all, beneath the planting, the branding, the gathering, there was tension, thick and heavy, like humidity before a summer storm. Clara stood in the barn, brushing down her horse, when Rivera rode in with news. "They've called a meeting," he said, dismounting fast. "Town hall tomorrow." Her hands stilled on the saddle. "Who's they?" "The new marshal and his council. Darrow handpicked every man sitting on it." Word. "Is there pushing a final vote on the Callahan Charter? If it passes, he gets the deed, no more appeals, no more letters." Clara set the brush down. "I'll go." Rivera looked uneasy. "Bo won't like that." She met his eyes. Bo isn't the one they're trying to erase. That night, Clara and Bo sat at the table, the fire low document spread out again like a war map. The original charter lay between them, along with the forged one, still stained with mud and ash. "There, planning a vote, Clara," said Bo, nodded slowly. "I heard I want to speak." His eyes snapped up to hers, to Darrow. "The council." To the town, he exhaled. "It won't change anything. That room's rigged before we even step through the door, and we blow the rig wide open." Bo was quiet. Clara leaned in. "We have the truth. We have the original charter. We've got half the valley behind us. People willing to stand up and speak. Words don't mean much to men with power."
"Oh."
"They do when they come from someone they can't ignore." Her voice trembled. Not from fear, but from sheer force of will. Bo looked at her a long moment, then said, "You stand up there and tell them what this land really means?" She nodded once. "I will." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Then I'll be standing right beside you." The next morning, they dressed in silence. Clara wore a deep green skirt and pinned her hair with the silver comb Bo had. Given her their second week together, she didn't wear perfumely, the scent of pine soap and wind. Bo wore his father's vest. The stitching near the collar, still torn from a long-ago ranch accident, never repaired. Half the valley waited. Tommy, the Gallaghers, Rivera. Even Mary Jo, recovered now, stood with her chin high and a notebook in hand. They rode into town together, not as protesters, but as owners of land, of truth, of memory. The town hall was packed. Darrow sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by 6 hand-picked councilmen. All of them wore pressed coats and tight expressions. "Let's begin," Darrow said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Bo and Clara stepped forward, the packet of documents in Clara's hands. "We'd like to speak," Clara said clearly. Darrow didn't even look at her. "This is a council matter. The public will have time after deliberations." She said, "You'll hear us first." The room hushed. She stepped closer. "My name is Clara Whitmore Callahan, and I have in my possession a federal land charter dated and sealed in Itzembabe Lushajo, unaltered, unchallenged, verified by the Office of State Records in Red Bluff, She placed the document on the table in front of Darrow. A few councilmen leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Darrow didn't touch it. This is not just about one deed, Clara continued, turning to face the crowd. It's about every handshake that ever meant something in this valley. Every acre earned through sweat, not signatures. She raised her voice. You say you're here to bring order, but you've sown nothing but fear. You've threatened families, raided homes, and now you want to erase the truth because it makes you uncomfortable. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara didn't stop. I didn't come here to be a wife to a land title. I came to build. And I found a valley full of people who have fought to hold their ground with dignity, with quiet, with loyalty. She turned back to Darrow. You think this council holds power? But it only holds paper. It's the real power is out there standing. Behind me, she stepped back. Bo took her hand, held it firm. The councilman shuffled. A few looked uneasy. One cleared his throat, leaned toward Darrow. You said the forged copy was all they had, he muttered. Darrow's jaw clenched. Before he could respond, the door opened, and in walked Sheriff Pike. He wasn't in uniform, just a hat and trail coat. But his presence stopped the room. I heard there was a meeting, he said. Darrow rose. You've got no authority here. I'm not here to enforce, Pike said. Here to witness, and to confirm that I saw this land charter myself. ESLF 8E10 Babai Tishersen. Back when Bo's father filed it by hand and rode 3 days to deliver it. It's the same damn charter I'm looking at now. Stunned silence fell over the room. Darrow's facade cracked. Then it settled, said one of the councilmen, clearly eager to step away from the fire. Original document stands. Darrow turned to him, eyes furious. You can't just... But it was over. Felt it in the air. The shift Willow Creek had chosen. Clara looked at him one last time. We don't need permission to protect what's ours. We just needed to remind you that we were watching. Outside, the townspeople erupted in quiet applause. Not loud, but sure. Rivera slapped Bow's back. Tommy whooped and spun in the dust. Mrs. Gallagher cried openly. Clara stood on the porch steps, the document safe again in her hands. Bo stepped beside her. You were remarkable. No, she said. We were. He slipped his fingers through hers. Let's go home, he whispered. She nodded. But deep down, both of them knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not the peace and pie kind of quiet, but the kind that sits just before thunder. The kind where you know something's still out there, waiting, watching. Darrow had disappeared, left town that same night with only a dust trail behind him. No official resignation. No confrontation. No apologies. But Clara knew. Better than to think that was the end of it. Men like him didn't just vanish. They retreated, regrouped, and came back smarter. At the ranch, spring had finally bloomed. The apple trees along the south fence were heavy with early blossoms. Chickens scratched near the porch, and Clara could hear the sound of the river growing bolder as the snowmelt rushed in. But even beauty couldn't keep her nerves still. She found herself jumping at noises, double-checking locks, counting supplies more often than necessary, Bo noticed. You keep pacing like that, he said one morning as she wore a path on the kitchen floor. You're going to wear through the boards. She gave a tight smile, didn't stop, reached. Overtook her hand. We won. She shook her head. We paused it. That night, when she couldn't sleep, she pulled out her ledger and flipped through the reports the neighbors had given her over the last few weeks. Something kept tugging at her, something unfinished. One note stood out. April 3rd, late rider seen near Tucker's Bluff. No brand on horse. Stayed just long enough to take something from the old mail bin. Tucker's Bluff was abandoned. It had been since the fever took the last family out 5 winters back. No one had reason to go there, unless her breath caught. She grabbed her shawl, threw on boots, and slipped outside. Bo was already saddling his horse. He didn't look surprised to see her. I saw the lamplight, he said simply. Figured you'd come to the same conclusion. They rode together in silence, the sky velvet black above them, stars like sharp pinpricks in a fabric about to tear. Tucker's Bluff was ghost still. The house had caved in, and the barn looked ready to sigh and collapse. But near the base of the bluff, just under the overhang, was the old post bin. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but the lock was new. Too new. Bo dismounted first, tested it. Recently replaced. Now he drew his knife, jimmied the lock open with a soft snap. Inside were 2 leather-bound ledgers, a small stack of folded maps, and a satchel with unfamiliar markings. Clara flipped. Through one of the ledgers, heart-pounding, lists, names, parcel numbers, initials that weren't theirs. Bo held up one map. It outlined Willow Creek Valinot the way the townsfolk knew it, but like a survey plan. With red X's and ink trails. A developer S-map? Holy hell, he muttered. Dero's not gone. He's sold us off. Clara's breath came shallow. This is a buyout strategy. He wasn't after our land for himself, he's working with outside investors. Bo nodded grimly. And we just cost them months of prep, which meant he'll come back, Clara said, voice cold. He'll have to. And next time, he won't bring papers, he'll bring men. They rode back at dawn, the sun casting long shadows across the trail like reaching fingers. That day, Clara called another gathering, this time not in town, not in secrecy, but right on Callahan land. Dozens came in foot, on horseback, by wagon. They brought blankets, baskets, and, most importantly, ears open and hearts. Ready, Clara stood on a hay bale and held the map high. This is what he left behind, she said. It is a blueprint. It's not just to take our homes, but to rewrite this valley as if we were never here. A low rumble of voices answered disbelief. Anger. Now we have a choice, Clara continued. We can wait. Let him come back with deeds and men and wagons and call it progress. Or we can build something so deep-rooted they can't erase it. Rivera called out. What do you mean build what? Bo stepped forward, lifting the second ledger. An association, he said. Ranchers, farmers, locals. Everyone who owns land or leases or even trades in this valley. A cooperative with shared stake, pooled resources and legal teeth. Like a union, someone asked. Like a wall, Clara answered. But law, loyalty, and shared ownership. If they want to fight, they'll have to fight all of us. People glanced at one another. Minds turned, and one by one they nodded. A murmur of assent grew into voices. Hands were shaken. Documents passed around, names signed with new pride. Bo saw Clara step back, watching them. Her chest rising with something almost like peace. He approached. You did that? Oh, she said softly. We did. But... Then her gaze shifted toward the ridge. A flash of metal, too far to be a farmer's plow. Too still to be a bird. Her voice lowered, already watching. Bo followed her gaze. Neither spoke. But in that moment they understood. The war for Willow Creek hadn't ended. It had just declared itself.
The first
snow of next winter came early. Dusted the rooftops of Willow Creek like powdered sugar, soft and quiet. No storm, no warning, just a gentle reminder that time moved forward, whether anyone was ready or not. Clara stood on the porch of the Callahan house, a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching flakes drift down in lazy spirals. The home smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Someone had left the radio on, low, humming an old hymn through the kitchen. Bo joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist, pulling her in close without a word. They didn't need to speak this morning. Some mornings were like that. Down the hill, movement stirred a line of riders. Men and women from every stretch of the valley. Members of the association, wrapped in wool and leather, riding in pairs or threes, pulling carts of food and supplies. Coming for the final meet of the year was no longer just a gathering, it was tradition. Clara smiled at the sight. Of them, new faces and old. Folks who had once barely nodded at one another in town, now waved across fields, shared tools, shared fence repairs, shared hope. Remember when all we had was a handful of names and a broken map? She said. Bo nodded, his chin resting lightly on her temple. And a woman with fire in her blood, telling a town to rise. She chuckled. I told the truth. that is all. He kissed the side of her head. You believed it. That is the difference. They stood together, watching as children tumbled from wagons, chasing each other through the dusting snow, squealing. Rivera's wife passed by with a pie in each hand. Mary Jo laughed from the Gallagher cart, her coat too big and her smile even bigger. The valley had endured. Darrow had returned, but word had come, months later, of a development project blocked 3 counties east, led by the same investors. Darrow's name scrubbed from every paper trail. Clara knew they weren't. Safe forever. Greed didn't sleep long. But the valley was ready now. They had roots. They had each other. And more importantly, they had a story no outsider could take. That afternoon, the barn was filled with voices and music. Someone played fiddle in the corner while elders told stories over stew. Clara listened to a rancher from the North Ridge recount the flood of '78 like it was a ghost tale. She smiled as Tommy tried to flirt awkwardly with a teacher from Red Bluff. Everyone seemed softer somehow. It's like scars had healed, or maybe just been accepted. Clara stepped outside as the sun lowered, painting the world in gold and fire. She found Bo mending a fence near the gate. He straightened as she approached. "Think they'll stay long?" he asked. She shrugged. "As long as they need, as long as they want." That's the beauty now. No one's holding them hostage. No one's pushing them out. He nodded, ran a thumb along the top rail. Funny how a broken fence used to feel like the end of the world. Now it just feels like part of the day. She smiled softly. They both knew the fence wasn't what had changed, it was them. I've been thinking, Clara said. About writing it all down, the story. It's from the first snowstorm to now. Not as a warning, but as a record. Bo looked at her, then past her, toward the rolling hills, the apple orchard, the barn now lit with lanterns and laughter. "Record's good," he said, "so they remember we were here." She reached for his hand, their fingers locking naturally, "So they remember why we stayed." He kissed her, then gentle and real. Not the kiss of a savior or a lover made for stories, but the kiss of a man who had chosen her again and again. And a woman who had rebuilt herself, not for him, but beside him, as equals, as something new. Later that night, long after the fire had burned low and guests had gone home, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a pen in hand. Blank paper before her. She didn't start with the storm. Or the fear, she started with the land. This valley has no fences around its heart. Belongs to those who dare to love it loud enough to stay, even when staying feels like war. And then she wrote more. Names, moments. Lessons that could never be fit into maps or deeds. Because the truth wasn't in the dirt, it was in the people. In the woman who crossed a country to become more than a bride. In the man who stood in his father's shadow and chose to cast his own. In a town that once whispered of shaman, learned how to speak of healing. And in every quiet victory that no outsider would ever see. When the last line was written, Clara closed the notebook, stood and walked to the window. Snow had begun to fall again. Soft, steady. Behind her, the house did not feel like a frontier anymore. It felt like home,